The Philadelphia 76ers are off to a red-hot start to the season with a 6-1 record and having sole possession of first place in the Eastern Conference. But even amid all their success, they may have a wandering eye across the United States borders and on the Toronto Raptors, where their missing piece to elevate them to a championship contender may just be lying. In this video, I want to break down why they're in a perfect spot to capitalize on a potential deal and who that player just might be on the Raptors. But before I fully dive into it, I do want to make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button. That at this point in time, 82.8% of you guys have not subscribed to the channel just yet. The Sixers season is in full swing. The vibes are high, and there's plenty of time for you guys to jump on the Sixers Digest hype train. We have a ton of big plans coming up for the season, and I cannot wait to break things down from start to finish. So make sure you're clicking that subscribe button and hang with me for the rest of the season. Now, to dive into the topic of today, I want to begin by highlighting this article on Hoops Hype by Yazzie Goslin, Michael Scotto, and the rest of the crew over there, and talk specifically about why the Raptors may be the team that is of interest to the Sixers. So let's kick things off and begin with this paragraph here, which writes, quote, "With the James Harden saga over, all eyes are on the next potential trade for the Philadelphia 76ers. They now can offer up to 3 first-round picks, 4 second-round picks, and 3 first-round pick swaps, and they're hoping it's enough for a player the caliber of Drew Holiday. Last week, we examined some players that the Sixers could pursue before this year's trade deadline. Now, I would begin by pointing this out for two reasons. Number one is I have seen this aggregated and kind of twisted as a way where it's looking like a player like Drew Holiday, and I do think that is written as a player like the level of Drew Holiday, not necessarily needing a stylistic player like Drew Holiday, although there's certainly an argument to be made that his style of player is what the Sixers are making, but I do think that was written more in the context of that fringe all-star level player, and the way that Holiday is what the Sixers are in the market for. So I did want to point that out. And then number two, the biggest thing that Daryl Morey has stuck to since this whole James Harden saga, and even dating back to the Ben Simmons saga, is that Morey said he would not trade Harden unless he gets a superstar in return or the assets to get another star. That is what he got in these trades. That these are valuable draft picks and valuable rotational players when we talk about Nicholas Batum, Robert Covington, and the other pieces that have come over. But those draft picks are the prize of the deal. Those are what open the door to the Sixers making another potential big move. And for the most part, the Sixers closet has been pretty bare for assets for the past couple years. So this was a way to restock it and then take a step back and evaluate what this team is truly missing before pouncing. And in the meantime, you can allow the rest of the NBA to figure out who they are as each team and then see what players are potentially available. Now, to further down this point, I do want to jump to the next paragraph here, which writes, quote, "But if Philadelphia strikes out at the trade deadline, they'll need to make sure that they secure a top free agent. Of all the top upcoming free agents who are extension eligible, OG Anunoby is one whose maximal extension amount, 4 years, $116.9 million, isn't plausible. Anunoby will likely become an unrestricted free agent to pursue a more lucrative deal with no shortage of suitors. He's an elite perimeter defender with a great tertiary option offensively who won't take the ball away from Maxey." So there's a couple key points to hit on here. Is number one, OG Anunoby is about the prototype for the modern NBA player, that he is a wing style player, a guy with good athleticism, a great defender, and a guy who can still deliver on the offensive end whenever he's asked. That he doesn't need the ball in his hands 24/7, but he can be effective with it, and more importantly, that he is still effective as a spot-up shooter and as a defender, even when the ball is not in his hands. Now, there's a couple players. I guess I want to rewind a little bit and just talk about the Raptors as a whole. I think the Raptors went down this path of this versatile, positionless basketball, having all these athletes, these guys that are switchable 1 through 5 on the defensive end, but they just took it a step too far. That when you look at their roster, there's too many guys with overlapping strengths and weaknesses and not enough guys to balance things. That it is to the key to a team, is having enough in your 5 men on the court to check every single box for how to win a basketball game. The Raptors have kind of took things too far by having too many guys that do these same things. Now, to point up specifically why they are in a position to make a trade here, I want to begin by looking at their cap situation here. So as you can see, Pascal Siakam will be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. OG Anunoby has his player option for next season, valued at just over $19 million, and then will be an unrestricted free agent the following year. Now, I do think OG Anunoby can comfortably catch more than $19 million on the open market, so I do expect him to decline that player option and seek a higher value deal. But the bottom line is both these guys have a chance to be free agents this offseason. So if you're the Raptors, if you're sitting there right now, why are you playing out the rest of the year with these guys? If you don't believe that they will be back, there's complete reason for you to trade them now and get something in return rather than letting them walk for free at the conclusion of the year. Now, Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby are both interesting players. They both have their pros and cons for why they would be that missing piece on the Sixers. Now, we know traditionally that Masai is not an easy guy to deal with. I've seen the quote saying that he's like that guy in your fantasy football league who's always proposing his worst player for your best player, things like that, and there hasn't been much traction there. But I do think from a logistical standpoint that you have to sit back and look at that and say it makes sense to trade them. And specifically when you're looking at the Raptors and their direction, I think it's become quite clear at this point in time that Scotty Barnes is the guy that they will be building around. And Scotty Barnes plays in a lot of overlapping areas and has a lot of overlapping skill set, specifically of Pascal Siakam and still OG Anunoby to an extent. And for good reason that Scotty Barnes is becoming the guy, that he is significantly younger. He does look like to taking a stride forward again this year. It's been a little bit of a strange career arc that he had a very impressive rookie season, then really kind of regressed and had a weird and bad second season, and he looks back to it this year, that he looks the most complete that I've seen him at the NBA level thus far, and the hope is that he continues on this pathway from here on out. So I do think the two options that the Sixers are looking at on the Raptors as far as completing and elevating them to a championship contender, it does come down to Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. So to kind of compare these two here, I do want to look at this. As you can see each of them, so Pascal, a little bit older, and you can see how these stats lay out, that OG is a better shooter, a better three-point shooter, better effective shooter. That Pascal is probably the higher ticket player, the guy that is known to deliver more. He has a bit more of a shot creation ability, a guy that's more well-rounded, and probably the better overall basketball player. But the Sixers have to keep this in mind from a fit standpoint. That too often we've seen them fall in love with this star hunting mindset that they just want the best player. Right now it is about getting the players that maximize what they currently have. Joel Embiid is the number one, the alpha on this team. Tyrese Maxey looks ready to be the true number 2 on a championship contender. What this is about is finding a player that blends those two and completes them as a trio while having the supplementary pieces behind them. I believe that guy is OG Anunoby out of these two. Now to look at the numbers specifically, to dive a little bit more into this season, I did want to pull up this, that we can see plenty of evidence why here, that the numbers for the most part look pretty similar. Pascal Siakam at 17.4 points per game, 6.9 rebounds, 4.8 assists, the more complete basketball player, and just 2 slots below him, OG Anunoby averaging 17.6 points per game, 4.1 rebounds, 1.7 assists. What jumps out to me is the efficiency. Pascal Siakam from the field shooting 45.1%, OG Anunoby 55.3%. From beyond the three-point arc, Siakam 29.3% on 5.1 three-point attempts, and OG Anunoby 41.7% on 6.9 three-point attempts on the year. Now, this is obviously a small sample size, that there's going to be plenty more to go on, but I do think that these stats are pretty indicative of who they are as players. But beyond just the numbers, what jumps out to me is kind of the usage and how these guys play. Siakam is a guy who likes to have the ball in his hand, who likes to operate in the mid-range. I have on many occasions compared him to Tobias Harris, more so from a stylistic standpoint in the way that they're both mid-range heavy. They both like to cook a little bit more than they probably should, and that I don't think that translates with this team. That we're just seeing the light at the end of the tunnel for the Tobias Harris contract. I think Pascal Siakam, there's a world where that ages similarly. OG Anunoby, only 26 years old. He's 3 years younger than Pascal. And most importantly, I see the fit, that he's a lower usage guy. He is that high-level defender. And as I look at the Sixers team, there's two specific spots that I do believe that there are holes in this team. Or not holes, but I guess where they may be able to be exposed when we look at the best team in the NBA and if they can compete in an NBA Finals. Number one, it is on the defensive side of the ball. That as much as they have improved with all these versatile wings, then they did make quite a statement by giving Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown making them struggle in that matchup with the Celtics. I still have some concerns if there is that lockdown defender on this roster, and I do believe OG Anunoby can be that guy. Number 2 is kind of a dribble penetrator, a guy who can create his own shot offensively, who can set things up from others. It's very clear a night and day difference on this team when Tyrese Maxey's on the floor and when he's not. Ideally, it would be nice to get another one of those guys who can provide a little relief or really just bring it on nights when Maxey does not have it going. I do believe OG is good enough to provide some of that. That no, his best asset as a basketball player is never going to be, putting it on the floor and creating for others. But I think he can do it enough that it would fit this team. And as we talk about fit, like that to me is a pretty perfect trio. That I don't want a guy who needs these extra touches, who's taking it out of Maxey's hands. Because when you do have a guy who can do things like this, that just can split a double team and take it to the rack and finish around, you want to complement that. You want to make sure that you give him the opportunity to continue dazzling on that level. And that's what Tyrese Maxey has proven to look like through the start of this year. Is he is ready to be that guy, to be a number 2 on a championship team, and he's improved leaps and bounds this season. That this is a guy who should be the front runner for most improved, who I believe is an all-star right now. That is the number 2. That is the guy. I think bringing in a guy like Pascal Siakam is too big of a risk. I know there's the ties to Cameroon between him and Joel Embiid, but there's also Pascal Siakam smashing Embiid in the face with his elbow on what was a dirty play during the playoffs a couple years ago. There's all these ties, all this history. To me, OG is a little bit more of a clean slate. There's never been that much of an altercation or any issues really between them. And he just, to me, is like the perfect style of player for the modern NBA and for what the Sixers need. And the last point that I did want to make sure that I hit on is why it is important for the Sixers to attack this before the deadline. That yes, both these guys are free agents next year. And yes, the Sixers will have the second most cap space, trailing only the Orlando Magic when we look ahead to this offseason. But if the Sixers are to make a trade now, they then can hand this guy a max contract at the conclusion of the season and use the bird rights to re-sign him. What that means is potentially opening an additional max slot, in addition to Tyrese Maxey, in addition to OG Anunoby, and in addition to Joel Embiid. That would be some amazing cap maneuvering and really what Daryl Morey's goal is through this whole thing. So think about that from a just theoretical standpoint. If that at the end of the season, and as the Sixers cap currently stands, that just Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey are really the future of this team. That Paul Reed is expected to be under contract, but there are a couple clauses dictated on how the Sixers playoff performance shakes out. That was put in place by the Utah Jazz, so they tried to snatch him in restricted free agency, but he is expected to be under contract as well. But beyond that, it is a blank slate, and that has been the goal of Daryl Morey, that he wants to paint this thing in the way that he sees fit, and he's finally getting the opportunity to. But think about what a potential roster like that would look like. That if it is Tyrese Maxey, OG Anunoby, Joel Embiid, an additional max slot, which could be maybe a player like a Klay Thompson, or if one of these Clippers players, a Paul George or Kawhi gets sick of things, something like that to bring in, and then whatever the veteran role players you want to bring in. Give me more minutes for Pat Bev. Give me more another Kelly Oubre reunion if he doesn't price himself out in the way he's playing. So I guess the bottom line is that the theory is there. And I do think that OG is the caliber of player that does it. I think there's a world where his best role or best usage as an NBA player is in this complementary third wheel kind of role. That I can see him taking a similar pathway of a guy like Andrew Wiggins did when he joined the Warriors, where he was in a too large of a role previously and wasn't able to deliver on that. Or even a guy like Aaron Gordon, who was trying to be the guy in Orlando. Then he came to Denver, where he was able to play off the other superstars, and he was vital to that championship run. I think OG Anunoby can fill in those shoes just fine for the Sixers. For now, there's plenty of season still to go, but it should be exciting that there are these options for the team, that they do have these assets to make a move. And they can sit back, let things unravel, let the Raptors think about, wow, do we really just want to let these guys walk away at the end of the year? Do we want to get nothing for it? Maybe we do accept a Clippers 2028 first-round pick and whatever else helps get the deal done. So I do think there is a world where this happens. For the meantime, we will enjoy the Sixers continuing to play this team-friendly style of basketball. For the moment, there's an argument to be made that they're right now up there with the best players or best teams in the NBA, ranking second in net rating, top of the Eastern Conference. It's tough to be frustrated about the way they've played, but I am excited. It's great that there is this room to continue getting better, and it just is exciting to be a Sixers fan right now. So appreciate all you guys for tuning into this video. I want to hear, what is your preference? Would you like OG? Would you like Pascal Siakam? Is there another guy? Or do you just let the team marinate as it is? Do you let things stand as they currently stand? I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Once again, make sure you hit that subscribe button, drop a like on this video, and I will talk with you next time. Peace.